Hello, welcome to the Honest Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob, and in true YouTuber fashion, I'll be doing an Age of Sigmar faction tier list. That's right, post the Battle Scroll update, I'm going to be giving you what I think are the armies that are going to help you do well at events, and also I'm going to throw in some spicy takes on whether or not the army will be fun or not fun to play. But of course, I'm wrong, because you've already told me I'm wrong in the comments. You haven't even waited to see what I've said in any of the video, yeah? And you've already told me that I'm wrong. You've skipped to the end, and then you've clicked what the tier looks like, and then you've started to write on YouTube frantically, okay? Don't do that, okay? I'm just going to delete I'm going to delete it, okay? No, I'm not. Go on, write it. It makes me laugh. Sometimes I just sit on the toilet, read it, and laugh my ass off. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to go through all of the factions and I'm going to rate them. How do I come to the conclusions? First off, I use the Age of Sigmar stats provided to me by Warhammer Rob, the best dude in the world. He gives me up-to-date information, and I normally base this information on things like meta representation, positive win rate potential, and also by just general faction win rates. Also, obviously, I do the Stat Center every Monday as well, which is pretty good information for looking at current trends and where armies are. And also, there's a good conversation about armies being good or bad based on if you're talking about the top of the meta, right? The top of the meta. Because sometimes, is an army going to be okay if you're playing once every 3 years? The answer is yes, because you're rubbish, not the army. And that's an important thing to remember. So, we're going to get straight in, and hopefully this wasn't too much preamble. Hopefully not. Let's see. Okay, all right. We got the classic S, A, B, C, D. If you've never done a tier list before for some reason in the world, S, bit too good. A, very solid. B, middle. C, not as good. I know you're going to, it's going to be unbelievable. D, right at the bottom. Some of this also will have some personal bias. That's an important thing to remember as well. I do bring with me some personal bias, games that I've played and games that are like, you know, talking to my friends. I have run several Age of Sigmar events as well here at the TSN Arena, so multiple. So you are going to have to remember that is going to come into account. All right, let's jump straight in. We're just going to go straight along the line. We're not going to messing around. First up, we're going to talk about Tzeentch. Tzeentch has done incredibly well. They weren't affected by the Battle Scroll, except for to get a massive boost to their manifestations. They got one manifestation that's crazy good now in the Sigil of Tzeentch, which is pretty good. There was a little bit of nerf to covering fire, and also the ability to get +1 to hit and +1 to wound from the Honor Guard ability. They are already a solid A. The Battle Scroll update keeps them at a solid A, but they may even be at an S. May. Are they fun to play? Yes. That's my other follow-up. I reckon that these are super fun to play. You're going to have loads of stuff to do in all of the turns. You've got some really dynamic choices, big picks, obviously. Skyfires, Kairos, Horrors, all really excellent. All right, Gargants. Let's go next. Where do Gargants go? Gargants have not been doing super well, but have hit a few 4-1s, haven't got any big 5-0s. They struggle a little bit because there's lots of objectives in several of the missions in Age of Sigmar, and also battle tactics normally require several units as well. So only having a limited roster is actually rubbish, but also, and most importantly, I hate them. So they're in the D tier. Okay, and now if you're a Gargants player, I'm really sorry. We know that we haven't had a good relationship for the past few years, and I apologize about that. But this is a position based on, you know, my principles, my feelings. This is a moral decision. Okay, and if I could, I would delete them. D for delete from the game. That's where I'd put them. All right, next up, Ogres. Ogres got a really rough run in the Battle Scroll update. They had about 1 week where taking a bunch of Gluttons was good. And then after that, people realize, I can just take loads of killy stuff and kill all the Gluttons because they're not actually that survivable. People started to really understand the shooting meta, which obviously Ogres can't play particularly well in as well. And we've seen their win rate tail off pretty significantly. And then the Battle Scroll came in and was like, womp, you're rubbish. Several of the units are rubbish and aren't able to play into the meta pick of being able to shoot a specifically reinforced unit very well because their version, lead belchers, suck. And so their position has gone from what I think was already a B and then is a worse B. I still think you can do okay with them. I don't think, like, they've still got some really good choices. Sabertusk are really good for battle tactics if they're not getting shot, and they've got some protections against that, which I think as well. The biggest problem probably for ogres is ogre players. They were used to just having some stone horns that they would just throw into a straight line, and then they were able to get gluttons that they threw into a straight line, and that's fine. They got that. But now, unfortunately, they might have to move stuff around in different places. So the biggest problem for ogres right now are ogre players. So I'm going to put them in B. But the Battle Scroll update was unfair. The Battle Scroll update on gluttons should not have happened. I completely disagree with that. It was a terrible decision. I don't understand how, in a world where Varangard and Chosen and a bunch of other really aggressive units with great armor saves of a 3-up are untouched. I know they got 10 points or whatever. How Glutton's got 30 points uptake, it's ridiculous. So I just want to say I'm feeling it for my ogre players, okay? Appreciate you loads. Beast of Chaos. Beast of Chaos actually in a pretty good position. They didn't get any massive bonuses from the Battle Scroll update, but as I have seen from my faction reactions, no one cares about them as a faction apart from the people who are actively running them. And the people who are actively running them are understanding just how good they are. Right, and because you're not really prepping against them, probably there's not many Beast of Chaos players left in your local club or in your local meta. When you do come up against them, it plays quite differently to not how all of the armies play. They kind of play like Stormcast, but with more bodies and more output. And so I'm going to put them up into the A tier for two different reasons. One, they do have some really solid options, but generally the skill cap of the players playing them is pretty high. But also they just have an innate advantage in that you really haven't played against them before. And that is just going to be a problem for you. But I think they're good. I think they're good in that. Cities of Sigmar. Ooh, tough times. Cities of Sigmar is an interesting one because obviously, like in 3rd edition, they were immediately very popular because you were able to take a lot of steam tanks. That inherently is orientated in the production meta, and that it was easy to put a bunch of steam tanks that were too strong onto the tabletop. Now, the builds that are better for Cities of Sigmar, like, for instance, taking Fusiliers, Dark Elves, Hammerers, all of which are featured in several different 4-1s, is actually really hard to produce, and to produce them at the pace where you're going to be able to put them on the tabletop. So I think, obviously, Hammers are really solid. All the Dark Elf units are really solid as well. There's an argument that some of the human units are pretty solid, but it is an army that requires a lot more effort, and it really struggles if it goes against debuff armies and isn't particularly good into heavy magic. I'd say it's not a bad army, though. It's just the production of those armies is actually what holds it back in the competitive rankings. Ultimately, why would I spend the time painting up hundreds of models really for a Cities of Sigmar army when I could paint a lot less elite units in some of the other armies and then be able to play them. They're also crazy cheap. Battle Scroll update didn't necessarily put any points up in any scary way. I personally think that they're a B army. I think that they're a B army. And what this means is I think that they can go 3-2 pretty comfortably a lot of the time. I think a really skilled general occasionally might be able to pop up to 4-1s and 5-0s, but I'm going to put them in B for I should give some context. S is consistently going 5-0 at a 5-round event. A is 4-1s a lot of the time, up to 5-0s, and then it's 3-2s, and then sometimes spike into a 4-0. That's where I think they are. Idoneth Deepkin. Deepkin are super interesting. They seem to have been abandoned by a lot of people, but Deepkin have had a really interesting player base. I should talk about that before we talk about the actual performance of the army. But interesting player base because for about 3 years, all you had to have was about 30 eels, and you could just play at every event ever for 3 years straight. Eventually, you had to change and you had to paint some other units. And now, what Deepkin are is a pretty high skill cap army and a pretty glass cannony light army. They do have mobility. They've got speed. Their tempo is different because their tempo is structured in their rule set, strike first being in battle round 3, and therefore they're not able to necessarily switch up their tempo in how they play the game. I.e., they can't go mega aggro in one game and then sit in a corner in another game. Not that you can ever sit in a corner, but that's an idea of what tempo looks like. But we have seen several different 4-1s pop up, and I think people have been trying to play them. They're very, I wouldn't say they're necessarily counter meta, they're just very fast. I would say that they're not necessarily as strong as some of the other armies, but I feel like you can put them in B and that's okay. But I'm going to put them in I'm going to put them in C because A, it's funny, because C and C. But I do think that they're kind of a low B, high C. That's where I'm going to put them. There we go. Flesh Eater Courts. Flesh Eater Courts are having a really tough time. Age of Sigmar is all about those centerpiece models. Those centerpiece models, like Flesh Eater Courts, as a good example, have Flesh Eater Courts have Usharan, and then you basically need Usharan for a lot of how your army would work. Unfortunately, centerpiece models are like very much the focus of like a very heavy shooting meta, a board that isn't particularly good at stopping shooting from hitting you. So that's a real problem. And then as soon as your heroes fall apart in this army, the whole army falls apart. Also, it's kind of got like an ogre problem as well. Ogres don't really have a good save. So like if you do have an army or any units that can do damage, it's just going through. And that's the same for Flesh Eater Courts. Your army is really built on your stuff dying and then being able to use recursion. But in a game where you can double turn something and you can't recur enough stuff, then that is actually a real problem. I'm going to put them in... I think I'm going to put them in C. That's what I'm going to... I don't know. I think it's a real problem for the army. They're going to need like a race to the bottom points-wise, where the units just get cheaper so that you can get enough stuff on the board. And then it might become a real problem, but I'm putting them in D. I'm putting them there. That's where they're living. If you don't agree, you can let me know why. Fyreslayers. Fyreslayers are pretty solid. They at least have ward saves, if not armor saves, put enough bodies on the board, and unlike Deepkin, can actually do some damage, which is pretty good. There is some aggressive damage. Mobility is their major issue, I have to say. Obviously, with battle tactics, that becomes a real problem, especially for some of the other armies. And ultimately, they're a combat army that's not as good as other combat armies, and they're going into a shooting meta where they don't have shooting to really counteract that shooting. However, their prayers you can't engage with, so they're moving into a game where they at least get all of their support pieces and they don't require you to you can't engage with their support pieces because they're via prayers versus via spells. Obviously you can shut spells down, but you can't necessarily. So I'm probably going to put them in B. I think they're a solid army, if not super fun to play. Gloomspite GItz. Gloomspite GItz got a massive whack with the singular build that people seem to be taking, which was Troggoths. Does that mean that GItz is no longer a good army? Well, Troggoths was an S army because it was just super good. You haven't actually lost a lot from GItz. Troggoths are still really solid. You just can't have quite as many. And what's interesting is because everything was focused around the Troggoths, because everything was already Troggoths around, everything was focused around the Troggoths, then the rest of the book hasn't been really looked at. I think they're a really, really solid army. The moon is really good. The only weakness maybe that this army faces is that their terrain piece is super killable, right? So I personally think that they're very solid. I think that they're going to continue to do really well. A is a good feeling, but I feel like it's an AS. That's where I feel like they are. They're in that AS category. But I'm going to put them at the top of A, and then I might move that to S in a bit, see how I feel. Blades of Khorne. Blades of Khorne have been really struggling. I actually still vibe on 4 Bloodthirsters, but Blades of Khorne have been struggling pre the balance update, and there was nothing in the balance update that really improved them. Their points are just copy and pasted from across from Age of Sigmar 3. Their rules were as well, without really thinking how the game has like dynamically changed. They have a very solid combat profile on the units that can, but mobility is an issue. The mobility is an issue. They do have some units that can go really fast, and it does feel like their entire army structure is built around you always having a Bloodthirster, which are super expensive, and so like they really struggle in that regard. They also have some really solid units. Some units got cheaper, like Wrathmonger's got cheaper, which I think was a good vibe, but ultimately they need units to die to really power up their allegiance ability, and those units don't die. But I'm going to put them in C. I think maybe I'll put Flesh Eater Courts in with them as well. They can both sit there together. I think that's fine. That's okay. That's okay. Right, Nurgle. Nurgle got a massive update in their ability to spread disease. Nurgle's main issue is in its mobility, and its disease mechanic was super weak. That it was super weak. So I would say it wasn't. They were doing okay before. We saw some 4-1s. I think we've even seen a 5-0. They should, on paper, have a really solid chance at winning games. They have good armor saves. They have good ward saves. They are like very tanky. I think the major issue is that output is pretty weak, especially against some other armies, and some other armies can punch through them, which I think is an issue for many people. And their key pieces are still susceptible to being killed because Games Workshop normally overreacts on like monsters that are very like survivable, and then doesn't overreact on others. And so I'm going to put. I think their ability to spread disease in the new update is helpful. I think they were already settled around like a B, is where they already were, and I think now with that update, I think they maintain their position in the B. So I'm going to put them there. I think that's a good spot. Nighthaunt were an S, and they continue to be an S. Sure, the army doesn't have army-wide run and charge now. I know they didn't put army whatever, but that is how we're all going to play it. They still have an unrendable save, which is really problematic. So that's really difficult, especially when we talk about Slaves to Darkness. When we get to those, we talk about that Slaves to Darkness, right, have a very high armor save game. So Slaves to Darkness have a high armor save game, and these guys ignore rend. So I'm trying to punch through the very, very meta, very good Slaves to Darkness armor saves by spending points on units that have good rend. And then I get to units that don't have good rend. Nighthaunt, who stop that rend and shut it down, as well as being fast, being able to teleport, being solid, doing good damage. I think that they're still in an S position, and I don't think that that's going to change. Ironjawz are kind of Ironjawz are a good like counterpoint to Nighthaunt as a good example. Like they've got okay rend in the right situation, but could do some massive damage. But you're paying points and a lot of synergy to make that massive damage happen. I also should mention with 3-inch range in the way that like Nighthaunt can move around the board with the fly keyword. We should talk about the fly keyword more. The fact that they can, when they're charging, they're always flying. When they're piling in, they're flying. Like the fly keyword is so effective for making them get to little support units, and Ironjawz can peek off the little units loads. Ironjawz didn't get enough points drops on any units that really mattered. Kragnos did get cheaper, but I'm always going to talk. I suppose I should talk about with Kragnos involved. Kragnos is like a whatever burger. He's insanely good for 580 points. And maybe that's going to bring the efficacy of Ironjawz up. I think you can do okay with Ironjawz, but I think that they just struggle. They don't have ward saves. They don't have recursion. They are missing so much, and they're pointed like they do have ward saves and recursion and everything else, which I think is nonsense. Oh yeah, they haven't got Kruleboyz on here. I'm going to put Kruleboyz in B, just to let you know. That's where I'm going to put Kruleboyz. This is not in this little tier list, or it doesn't look like it is, no. So I'm going to put Kruleboyz in B here. That's where I'm going to put them because they do have more utility, right, than some other armies, and they didn't get a points adjustment to the Monster Killer ability, right? That's what they didn't get. Right, so I'm going to put them here in B. That's where I'm going to put them. They didn't update to the points on Monster Killer units, which were spammed loads. Right, and so I'm just going to put them there for now. But I think their dirty tricks won't work sometimes, and when their dirty tricks don't work, they don't work as well. So that's pretty good. So then Skaven. Where do I think Skaven settled after the update? I think Skaven are okay. So they obviously got their new battle tome. I think their win rate was really low because they didn't have Vizek. But Vizek suffers the same problem that Ushran has in that he's a centerpiece and gets his ass kicked. I think you can build some really good like shooting builds, but shooting builds don't necessarily go grab objectives. So I think that's the thing to talk about. I think Skaven players need to commit to the fact that they need other units in their army. For instance, maybe some Night Runners to go grab objectives or do battle tactics. Right, so that's what I would say that they need a little look at. I don't think that they're terrible though. I don't think they're sitting in this section of C. So I'm going to put them in B. That's where I think that they live. I think they're okay. I think you've got some real good options with Skaven. I just think it's a really high skill cap. They've got some amazing abilities. Like 3 claw steps ahead is actually super impactful. I think that's really good. So yeah, I'm going to put them in B, and I don't think that's a bad place to be. Honestly, I think what will happen is people are going to piss and moan loads about Skaven. You're going to get a points update, and you're going to scoot up this little chart. I think so. I think you'll be okay. Stormcast Eternals. Stormcast Eternals, super interesting. They have got such a diverse roster, but it feels like everyone committed early to Krondys being a 2-cast. They're like, I want Krondys, he's a 2-cast. Centerpiece model, susceptible to all the shooting. Obviously, you can bring along ward saves and other stuff, but he's a really good piece, and people have done well with him already. Long strikes, still very effective, and are very effective. I think lots of the mounted cavalry are also really good as well. Paladors are nuts and can do some really fun stuff. I think as an army, I think the real problem with Stormcast is that it's just a really diverse player pool, but I would actually put them up here in the kind of A section. I think that you can play them really well and you can be really good with them, but it requires very specific planning and training with that specific army build, right, to play. But they have a lot of options. They have a lot of options in the army, so that's where I'm going to put them. I think they've got a lot of options. They can do a lot of stuff. You got a lot of toys in here, so I'm going to put them in A. Sylvaneth. Sylvaneth, everyone was saying weren't doing very well, but then were doing really well, and then they got a balance update, which made them probably a little bit better. Not necessarily loads better. The big change to their war scroll in the balance update was obviously to the trees and being able to extend the range and being able to do strike and fade and teleport. But I would say that they were already in an okay position. I think the biggest thing that probably would affect them is a change to the Morbi Kunj, because Alarielle being able to put out loads of additional stuff that you have to kill after stuff that you already... Like, you kill a Sylvaneth unit and then you kill a Morbi Kunj, like a manifestation. Then the Sylvaneth unit comes back and then the manifestation comes back. You're like, okay, it feels like it's just a lot of wasted potential. You've got some pretty good units. I think limiting shooting or making shooting be something that's not as effective into the Sylvaneth units is pretty nice. Kurnoths are grossly overcosted. Alarielle's a boss. Belthanos going up is like a whatever burger, in my opinion. So I think Sylvaneth are in a really good spot. I've played with them and had a really good time. I think the terrain has upgraded them a little bit now. I feel like that they're like a B to an A, maybe a low A, but I think they're very good. I think they're really solid. They've got massive threat range. And Alarielle, as a centerpiece model, unlike Usharan, ultimately can come back from the dead, which is pretty nice. No ward saves army-wide is like pretty grim fandango. I don't love that. B or A. B or A. I'm putting them in A. I think they're better than Cities, Ogres, Fyreslayers, Nurgle, and Skaven. So I'm going to put them there. All right, Slaves to Darkness. They're here. Slaves to Darkness are up here. They got a 3-up armor save. They've got crazy output. They have Be'lakor, which is the best war scroll. You've got players of just varieties of different skill sets playing with them. They're always in the 4-1 section. They're always in the 5-0 section. Are they as good as Nighthaunt? Probably not. Are they as good as LRL? Probably not. So they'll be the bottom of S. But they're overtuned. Absolutely, and the internal balance on that book is just dog shit. Like, Be'lakor is obviously crazy good, which is fine having a centerpiece model that's good, but I don't know why you're not taking Varangard and Chosen. But there's also been other builds as well. We've seen like multiple warrior block builds, which I think has been pretty spicy and very interesting. But they're just super over the top. Ossiarch Bonereapers. Ossiarch Bonereapers feel like that they should be as good as Slaves to Darkness. Good armor saves, good war saves, a little bit of recursion. They can involve themselves in loads of games. Death Riders are really solid. Their support pieces are really good as well. But they don't have the pile in attack twice. Like, that's, I think, the kind of center, like the bit, and like their centerpiece model Catacross doesn't do what OBR doesn't do what like Slaves to Darkness does. I don't know why it took me so long. So I'm a little bit loath to say. I'm not saying B. I think they're in A. I think that they're solidly in A. I think Death Riders are good. I think they're fine. I think maybe that they might even be behind Sylvaneth. To be honest, I feel okay with the A tier at the moment. I think that's fine. I think that's good. I might put. Yeah, I think I'm okay with that. I might put these down a bit. That's right. I'm gonna put cities down the lower in the A section. Is what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna move these up. I think. But yeah, I think it's really good. I think really good. Also, you can have Nagash. You can have Nagash. That's been pointed out in the chat. You can have Nagash, and Nagash is dumb. Nagash is silly dumb, like silly dumb. And that applies to all armies. KO have got 2 5-0s under their belt in this GHB. Yes, they don't necessarily engage in the manifestation game, but they do get to shoot twice using covering fire, obviously. That's been reduced a little bit because you can't, within 12 inches if you're using the Honor Guard ability as well. But I'm going to put them, I'm going to put KO. I'm going to say that they're in B. And I think they're probably better than... They're probably better than Skaven cities. That's what I'm going to say. Right? That's what I think they are. And then we've got LRL. Lumineth are the best army in the S category, is what they are. They didn't get changes to the units that needed changing. For some reason, people seemed incredibly excited about Dawn Riders going up points, and Dawn Riders are never the problem. And it's because the balance scroll was updated like 8 weeks to 10 weeks before it actually got released. At which point we know the real problem is like wind chargers. Even if you get rid of wind chargers, Sentinels didn't go up points, and they're silly good. Even if you get rid of Sentinels a little bit or put them up points, Techless is still amazing. River Blades are good. Wind chargers are good. Spirits of the Wind help you. Anyway. They're the best army in the game by a country mile. And they were actually the best army in the game before the balance update. And all the balance update really did was put some of the armies that shut them down, Nighthaunt, and push them down the boat, down the rung a little bit. So they're probably in their own category now. They're the best army in the game. They might even get their own tier. There we go. We'll just put them up there. Okay? So simple. So we'll just we've amended it. We've changed the tier around for this specific situation. Every war scroll just seems to have an extra other thing for no apparent reason. Yeah, like a good example would be like all of the stuff that you can do in LRL's allegiance abilities, and then you go look at what you can do in an Ironjawz allegiance ability, which is just move 3 inches. It's absolutely pants. Like it's so bad. It's that the other armies have less. I think that's actually like the real takeaway from this tier list is that many of the armies that aren't doing as well, it's just they have less. LRL just have more. Nighthaunt had more. They still have more. Like being able to pile in 1 unit 3 inches in a movement phase with Mighty Destroyers is not the same as an unrendable army-wide save. They're not the same category of ability. But because Games Workshop is obsessed with having all allegiance abilities on a single page, therefore, I mean, they didn't even give Ironjawz more than a single page. But they're like, okay, you can't have more abilities than that. It's, kind of a conversation with Sylvaneth as well. Like, they just give them less, and so they have less. Okay. And therefore they do less. Seraphon have got some amazing abilities. I just feel like Seraphon players really devolved in Age of Sigmar 3. They just sat in a corner, they had Croak, and they just did some spells, and they never learned how to play Warhammer. And so in Age of Sigmar 4, this is really tough for them because they don't really know what they got to do. You have maybe one of the best units in the game in the Hunters of Haunchy with Starstone Bowlers. Those will just score you points all day, forever and always. Your Slam brings models back from the dead. And then at that point, you have to start trading units and understanding the board state. And honestly, it's much easier to have done that with a Croaknado in the past. And now, they don't know where's Blizzard, they ask themselves all the time. They're like, the enemy has charged me, just stood in a castle, I don't know what to do. But we have seen them do really, really well. We've seen multiple different builds, specifically people focusing a lot around Agrodons, Croxagors, and the Skink Cavalry, which seemed very effective. And they all didn't get changed in the points. They didn't go up points. They didn't get hurt. They seemed really safe. So I'm going to put them in. I think the Slann is really tough to protect. So it's arguable that they might not go in the A tier. But I feel like that they're really solid. Yeah, I don't think that they compete with the armies in the A tier, but I think that they're really good. What do I think needs to get them up to the A tier? I don't know. I think warrior builds are okay. I think some of the units, they've got a lot of units, but some of them are just like, do you know what? Seraphon not being giga broken is a fine place for life to be. So we're okay. Soulblight Gravelords. I'm going to put them in the A tier. They took a nerf in the Battle Scroll update. They have got some very solid units in Manfred. Obviously, Graveguard, really excellent. These did all change points. I am aware of that. And Torgillus, which was probably a broken unit, got a rules change. You should have got a points reduction at the same time. Being able to double dip their allegiance ability for healing was very, very strong. But ultimately, they have some really great units for scoring battle tactics and grabbing objectives. That's number one. How do you play the game? And then beyond that, they've got some really great units for starting to hurt the enemy or even bog down the enemy. So I think they're in a really good spot. They've got great spells in their spell lore. I'm a big stand for this Soulblight book. I think this Soulblight book is really good, just requires a lot of play. I think that they're probably... They also contain Nagash as well. I think OBR is probably better than... I think OBR is probably more up here in the A section. And probably can compete with some of the others. And I think Soulblight is probably better than Stormcast, maybe better than Beasts. So I probably will put it something like that up there. Daughters of Khaine, I think Daughters of Khaine are really good. They've got two different solid builds as well. You've got Witch Elves who can fight all day. They're glass cannony. They kind of play like ghouls. Unlike ghouls, though, they can do 8 billion damage. Morathi's obviously a cool centerpiece, and the snake builds are really solid as well. You see them do okay. They've got Qunari for battle tactics. That's solid. I don't think they're a bad army. I think they're a great army. I think they require some play. There's even some fun little Doomfire builds that have done well. Haven't seen any 5-0, and I've seen people people 4-1 a lot. This has traditionally been an army that hasn't actually ever had a lot of representation on the table. Even the players that play the giga broken armies generally tend to just always move away from Daughters of Khaine at some point. Maybe it's just the mono build nature of it. Maybe it's always using Morathi. Maybe it's people understanding how to use Morathi, but people generally move away from them. I'm not really 100% certain why. So their meta representation has always been really, really low. I think that they're not a bad army, though. I definitely will put them up in the A tier. That's where I feel that they live, up there. And then finally, Slaanesh. Woo, Slaanesh. Next army on my docket to play, I think, actually. I think Slaanesh, pre the Battle Scroll, they were doing fine. They got an unnecessary 10 points uptick on Blitzbarb Archers. I think the way that they don't necessarily interact between mortals and demons is kind of okay, but does make it kind of like a two-tone book, which I think is tough for the Slaanesh players. Their allegiance ability got an upgrade, so it doesn't necessarily cause as many issues. But like Ironjawz, their allegiance ability comes at a cost, or is a weaker allegiance ability, whereas like the others, they're stupid good. It's actually the War Scrolls that make Slaves to Darkness really good. So I think Slaanesh are good. I don't think they're any better than Seraphon. So I'm going to put them in that category. I mean, I think that they're actually very, very good. I think that I think you can play them at an A level. I think you can even win an event with them, maybe. Probably not without good LRL. LRL are really good and also really popular. If LRL were had the representation that Fyreslayers had, where no one plays them, right? Then that would be fine. But everyone plays them. So you are always getting your ass kicked by that army. They're so much more survivable than Slaanesh as well. Your big centerpiece models are very susceptible. So I think that you kind of settle around here in the B section. So that's it. That's how I think the tier list looks post the Battle Scroll. Obviously, give me your thoughts about what you think I did wrong here and which ones you don't agree with. Don't forget, I put Kruleboyz in B. I probably put Kruleboyz towards the top end of B, maybe even put them into A, but I'd put them into there. That's a bit that's missing. But yeah, that's what I would say the list looks like. And it's not a surprise to me. Games Workshop consistently don't understand the scaling abilities, especially for things like battle traits, which is your allegiance abilities. They don't know how to organize them in a functional way. And comparing apples to oranges, some armies, Ironjawz is a good example, just have atrocious abilities when you compare them to what's happened with Nighthaunt. That said, though, I want to make sure I say in this video that this is a tier list for tournament gaming. All right, this is a tier list for tournament gaming. Let me tell you, if you just play with your friends over the weekend, right, or you're playing at your local club, this doesn't matter. Okay, right? This is about like a unit's ability to be like Army's ability is to have within their roster the ability to do a battle tactic. You might not even remember to do a battle tactic. And I don't even mean move your models to do it. You might forget to pick one. Okay, if you're just playing games at your local club, you don't play a tournament, you're just having a fun time, most of these things don't really matter. Okay, some armies can seem super oppressive, and if your friend at the local club is being like, I'm going to run this list I saw in the stat center, which is 3 wind spirits, some sentinels, they're not really trying to have a club game. They're trying to use the meta build at a club game. You should just sort of talk to them and say, bro, just take some other units. We don't really know what we're doing. Okay, just have fun. That's what you should be doing. Like this, and then if you're sad about how you're like, you've built and painted Ironjawz, right here on my desk, ladies and gentlemen, right here, you can see a mega boss on foot. Okay, right there. Okay, Ironjawz stand through and through. Okay, love Ironjawz, right? Think they're great. It's sad that they got that your army is weaker, and then your army is weaker. Because games just writes bad rules. Like, that's the situation. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a good time with them. I really genuinely believe that that's true. I genuinely believe if you're playing an event, you won't have as good a time because you're just going to get your face stomped in by all the better armies, right? But this hopefully will give you some context for being like, okay, I shouldn't win most of my games. If you're an Ironjawz player and you win 2 games, I think you're crushing it. You're crushing it. That should be your personal achievement level for each army. Maybe that's what I should do for another video. I should be like, you're going to play an event. How many wins should you get with your army? Like that's it. If you're an LRL player and you aren't going 5-0, you're the problem. Okay? That's the situation. That's how that works. Okay? So there's a lot of pressure on those LRL players versus you running around with Ironjawz. So that's actually pretty fun to be in that other position where you're like, I only need to win 1 game. That's all I got to do. Okay. So that's the thing to be conscious of. It's the same with Slaves to Darkness. Like Slaves to Darkness, you should be winning 80% of your games, right? And if you're not, that's your problem. Okay, that's for you to be working out. And that should give you some benchmark as well. If you are looking to improve as a player, if you're looking to be a better tournament gamer, you need to be asking yourself why you're not doing better, right? Because your army has got the juice. Yeah, the Nighthaunt got the juice, LRL got the juice, Safe Starters got the juice. You should be winning those games. So ask yourself why you're not. Okay, that's the important part. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye.